Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So as you guys do know, we are playing the FIDE chess.com Grand Swiss tournament, a very high level tournament. But by special request for my guy, appreciate everything very much, man. I do have a Daniil Dubov versus Ivan Saric. And so this is coming from round 6. It's a really pretty exciting game. I do have some nice concepts to talk about. And, you know, I had to brush up on my Croatian because I have not spoken Croatian in probably over a year. So I had to double check and make sure I was good. Everything else I kind of got. I do have a new phrase in Tagalog, so I'm gonna toss that in there. But for all of my people that are in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Maligayang pagdating sa my chess, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, you lit magandang umaga. Masaya ko makita kang muli. I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by. Anybody who is from Russia, I will say privyet, dobroy otra. I think it might just be morning, like 1 or 2 a.m. or something like that. Spasibo for coming by and taking a look at my video. Anybody who is from Croatia, I will say zdravo, kako si moje prijatelji. Thank you guys very much for stopping by. And always feel free. If I do say something, if you are a native to that language, and I do say something that is slightly off, feel free to put a comment down there and let me know, kind of tweak it, because I do want to speak everything that I do speak in all these languages as perfectly as possible. So do not think that I will feel like you're criticizing me for doing that. I'm giving you permission. Bam! All right, if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we do have e4. We got c5, knight to f3. We do have d6, and this, of course, is the Sicilian defense. And what do you guys hear me say all the time? Like 80% of the time. This is going to be probably 75-80% of the time is what you see. And we do have bishop to b5. It is not the most common way to play, but it's a nice little forcing line because you know you are forcing black to make a decision. There's actually something very interesting I'm going to mention about this. But this is the canal attack. We do see knight to d7. Of course, as you guys know, there are only 3 possible ways to block this check. 2 make sense, 1 does not. Well, actually, no, there's 4 different ways. Let me not mess that up. There's 4 different ways. You can go knight to c6. And you can go what we saw in the game, knight to d7. And then you can go bishop to d7. But as always, it is a legal move. You can see queen down to d7. And as insane as this sounds, there are 2 games in the database with this exact variation. And one of them actually went like this. And this is it was a Boris Gelfand game. I'm not 100% sure of the details, but I can promise you that this game cannot go in this order. Because this literally, I mean, the queen is on pre for like forever. But this is how the game goes. We see c4, g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7, d4, pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, knight to f6, f3, castles by black, bishop to e3, and then we see knight to c6, and then we have castles by white. And like I said, this cannot possibly be the way it was played because nobody in their right mind, if they see this coming on the board with queen to d7, is not going to immediately take this queen. Nobody on earth. You can be rated like 50 and you're going to take the queen. Anyway, it's crazy that I saw that in the database, but that is a game. And crazy thing about it is black actually won that game. So I got to get the story behind that game, man. It's crazy. But anyway, we do see knight to d7. We got castles by white. We got a6 forcing the issue. So the bishop does come back to d3. This isn't super ideal. You know, you probably want to go ahead and take on d7 or go back to e2. Bishop to d3. It does kind of put you in a little bit of a pickle because you have a kind of a problem with this bishop. You can, you know, try to fianchetto it, but I mean, you are blocking one of your central pawns and you really want to push d4. So, like I said, bishop d3 is not losing by any means, but you know, it is kind of making things just a little bit harder for you than you need for them to be. We do see knight to f6. We got c3, creating some lift for your bishop. We do see b5. We got A4, bishop to B7. So, you know, we're putting a little bit of pressure on this nice little central pawn. And, you know, we don't have the ability to play D3 because, you know, bishop is on D3. Pawn takes B5, pawn takes B5, rook takes A8, queen takes A8. And then we do have knight to A3. And we're just planning to, you know, throw a little double attack. We basically, as white, given up on this pawn because you see that there are 3 people attacking it and only 1 person defending it. So it's a goner, right? So we do see B4. Knight comes to B5, and this is being slightly tricky because, you know, knight to C7 will, you know, will make a little scrumptious meal out of the king and the queen. So we do see queen to A7. Pawn takes B4, pawn takes B4. We got bishop over to C4. And then, actually, backing up, I almost forgot to mention, after A5, queen to A5, pawn takes B4 is the novelty of the game. First time ever we've seen this. And then we go forward. Bishop comes to C4. We do see knight taking E4. So now we finally have grabbed the pawn for black. The only thing you kind of do have to be wary about is your king is in the center of the board, which doesn't seem like a problem at the moment, but we're going to see. We do see D3 finally getting that bishop playable. And then we do have the move D5. And I ask you now, this is the point that we come to in the game, that if you do want to pause the video and try to see what white plays here, it's a really nice move. Go ahead and try to find this move for white. Okay, it's actually like a crazy move. But it's just a really simple move, but I don't think anybody really thought to do this. I know for sure I wouldn't have thought to do this. I mean, maybe if I prepared it, but the move does not involve moving this bishop at all. So if you guessed a bishop move, nah, that's not what Dubov did. He said bishop goes to F4, which insanely enough is the best move to play in the game, because a little bit of the problem is you are protecting this knight with the bishop. So you really can't move it without dropping the piece. But I mean, you're kind of dropping the piece if you move it. So I mean, you know, or if you don't move it. So it's kind of like a lost anyway. So bishop goes to F4. We do see E5 gaining a tempo on that bishop. Knight takes E5, and then we do see pawn taking C4. Pawn taking back on C4. You know, now we have just, you know, protected our knight. We do see knight taking E5. Bishop taking E5, and then we do see the move bishop to C5. And this actually dead evens the game at this point. It's kind of crazy, but it does. Backing up, instead of this, black actually had the move F6. And this does maintain the advantage for black because you are up an entire piece. You're down some pawns or a pawn, but you are up a piece. So after you see the move rook to E1, you would see queen back to B6. You know, just kind of tickling this square a little bit. You know, why not? Bishop coming back to D4. We see queen to C6. And, you know, threatening checkmate is never a bad idea. You know, you can just throw the knight anywhere and get some checkmates rolling. So the queen does go to H5 with check. We got G6. Queen coming over to D5, really wanting to trade. Queen takes D5, pawn takes D5. You got king over to D7. And then even when you have rook taking E4, you just simply protect your pawn on F6. You know, after F3, the bishop does take. And, I mean, everything is fairly even. I mean, you do have these double bishops in a pretty open position, so that's pretty killer. You know, the pawns are equal. So, I mean, this is actually a really nice position for black. But, like I said, we did see bishop going to C5. And this allows bishop to D6. But bishop to D6 actually allows queen to D8, but we don't see that in the game. We actually see bishop takes D6. It's just flip-flopping and just tossing the advantage back. Knight taking D6, knight taking D6, and then we do have queen to queen takes D6. And we have actually reached a pretty critical point in the game because black has to play very precisely in this position because, I mean, if not, you're just going to get mated or you're going to be losing a piece. If you allow this bishop to sit here, you know, we have, you know, a check on this square, you know, after maybe a rook to E1 or immediately, this bishop is dropping because there's just no way to protect it. So we do see bishop back to C8. And we are anticipating that rook comes to e1 like it does. And then bishop covers on e6. So for the moment, black has pretty much, gotten things covered. They're just down the pawn. But they are up an entire piece. So we're going to see, like, if black can really do something with it. So the rook comes over to d1. Why not threaten, all kinds of nasties over here, trying to pick up the rook or something. Queen comes back to a8, just trying to, protect that back rank. We do see the pawn pushing to c5. And I mean, it does look a little dangerous, but as the computer always says, triple zeros. This triple zeros be killing me, man. Like, there's 3 different moves that give triple zeros in this position. We see queen over to c8, just trying to, just control everything that we can. But we do kind of have a little bit of a problem because this rook is not being used in the corner. So, I mean, really, it's almost like black is playing a queen and a bishop versus a queen and a rook. If the king can't move, can't get that rook out. So we do see c6. And then we have h5. Like, you have to try to find some way to get this rook into play because you are down a piece. The rook swings over to e1. We see rook to h6. And finally, black has gotten their rook out. But, I mean, you guessed it. It still says triple zeros. Killing. So, the rook comes up to e5. We do see queen over to d8. Black would love to trade in this position. But, I mean, white just says, hey, man, I'm going to take a pawn. And I'm going to try to get out of the way. We definitely can't trade because then I'm going to be like, down some pieces, right? So the queen does come, the queen does come to c7. And then we see queen to c5. We got this passed pawn over here on the b file. So, I mean, it's looking kind of crazy. So we do see queen over to e7. And we're, black is like, hey, man, I got an extra piece. As I always say, let's trade, right? So the queen does come down to c3. We see queen over to c7 again. And then we actually see this pawn starting to roll. White is, kind of covering, everything for the moment. And so, I mean, get this pawn rolling, right? So the king comes down to e7. We see b5. And so, I mean, it's still triple zeros. Like, it's not really like either side is doing, anything crazy. I mean, this rook is held by this pawn. This bishop is held by this pawn. So, I mean, there really isn't a good way for white to break through. But you really do have to be careful with these pawns, though, man. So the rook comes up to h8, just trying to lend, some more support to these pawns, just making sure they're stopped. The queen swings over, to g3. And, I mean, we're being kind of sneaky here, man, because you do want to take rook e6 with check, discovering an attack on this queen. But, black is not, they're not feeling that. So we do see rook over to d8, and we are threatening the very juicy rook to d1 checkmate. It's like, hey, man, do this and take my queen. I don't care. I'm going to checkmate you, right? That's better. So we do see h4, creating some lift for your king. And now we definitely do have to do something about this queen being undefended. So we move our king over to f8, and we are not in checkable areas anymore. We're actually kind of doing okay, but... we actually have a very superior endgame for white in this position. So we actually see rook taking e6. The queen is taking on g3. Pawn takes g3. And then we do see the pawn taking on e6. And the major thing that's really unfortunate about the position as it stands right now is the fact that you have these pawns so far advanced. So it looks visually like, hey, man, like I'm down some material, right? Nah, because unfortunately, this rook cannot hold these two pawns when they are that far advanced. So there is a common endgame where two connected pawns are on the 6th rank against the rook, and they just beat the rook, right? So just to kind of like show you the visual of what that might look like. We don't see that actually in the game. We actually see c7, which is more forcing. But to illustrate the endgame that I'm trying to talk about, let's go ahead and go off and just play some random moves just to get the visual set up. Let's say king goes to f2. And like I said, I mean, this is like a really horrible move in this position. It actually loses. But I'm just trying to get us into the position so I can, so I can tell you guys about this. So let's say we got the king moving over to g8. We see the pawns up here on the 6th rank. And then we see the rook moving over. So once these two pawns have hit the 6th rank together, there is not a way for a rook to really do anything. You can't come on the side. You can't come in front. You can't come behind. There's nothing that you can do because these pawns are moving forward supported by one or the other, and there's nothing you can do. So if we just have, like, let's just throw a random move, rook to b8, you're going to be seeing c7, and then there's just nothing for you to do. You can't take here because you're looking at this. You know, you can't just move to the side because you're looking at this. There's just not a way that a rook, it's crazy because a rook is powerful, but against 2 pawns on the 6th, you know, this is obviously something that Dubov does know about, and he played this beautifully. But backing up, like I said, pawn did take e6. We see c7. And then, I mean, knowing that this is a losing endgame, you know, Saric just says, man, I'm just going to go ahead and just give away the rook because let me try to get my king in a position to stop this b pawn. So king comes to e7. We see pawn taking d8 with check, queens with check, king taking d8. We see king up to f2. We see king down to c7, king to e3, king to b6, king to d4. King takes on b5, and then we see the king swinging back over to e5. And it is in this position that Saric does resign the game. Now, the thing about the situation is, we back up here. In this position, pretty much any king move is going to win. You can directly go and take the e-pawn if you want to. It doesn't matter. But you do want to kind of get in the habit of trying to move and either, like, you know, outflank, you know, oppose or shoulder, you know, black's kings. And, you know, hopefully people, you know, they're familiar with those terms, but those are just like king and pawn or king and king type in-game concepts. And it's always a good idea to try to, like, block and push away the opponent's king as much as possible, even if it's not even necessary. It just shows really good technique. So this is what you see Dubov doing in this position. Like, they're walking towards the pawn, and he's trying to make it to where, you know, this king, you know, doesn't have a direct path, you know, more than this one does going towards this pawn. So once king comes to e5, there is no way that you're going to be able to protect this pawn. And then after you munch this pawn, if we just play a couple of moves, you know, king is probably going to go up here. And then, I mean, you know, it's like, there's nothing to do. You know, you're going to be trying to come down here, but I mean, you know, you're not going to make it in time. And, you know, you can even take this pawn if you want to. I mean, you're just going to sidestep and you're running this pawn all the way home. So, you know, there's just nothing to do. And of course, Saric is seeing all of this, and he goes ahead and throws the towel in. And, you know, he's playing one of the best players in the world, man. So that is that game. I appreciate everybody very much. The new phrase that I learned in Tagalog was kapayapa. I'm going to say this wrong. I already know, but I always do for everything I learn. Kapayapaan sa iyo. I'm trying to say not best wishes. What is the peace to you? So similar to assalamu alaikum in Arabic, I'm trying to say peace to everybody. I appreciate everybody very much. Kakos, or not kakosi. I don't know how to say thank you in Croatian. I will find out. But spasibo for everybody that is coming from Russia. Meruming salamat aking makaibigan. Merci beaucoup, for sure. Mameya pour toi. Merci beaucoup, mon ami, very much. And I definitely want to give a shout out to my guy, Tenacious AL. Nice little, like, side joke with that for the $50. That's very much appreciated, man. I had to hook you up with a video, man, for sure. Hopefully I did it justice, man. Let me know in the comments, and I will see everybody next time.